all of the microphones around the drum kit are hearing an essentially random phase relationship to each other. There are some people who have a strong opinion about the absolute polarity of the recording of the drums. For example, if you're in the audience and the drummer hits the bass drum, there is a positive pressure wave that comes away from the bass drum, and that's the first thing that you hear as an audience member, is a positive pressure of the wave of the sound coming from the bass drum. And so some people feel very strongly that your recording should mimic that effect. That is, when the bass drum is played, that should be a positive movement of the air. That is, the piston movement of the speakers should move toward the listener. I think that's a theoretical position, because from the perspective of the drummer, the first thing that happens when he hits the bass drum is that the air column moves away from the drummer. And so if you observe the convention of having the positive movement of the speakers when the bass drum fires, you are creating something that is an artificial experience for the drummer, the guy that played the drums. But also, I don't think it's that important. I have auditioned the absolute polarity of the recordings one way or another, and very rarely I will have a preference. I think some of that preference has to do with the electronics of the channels. That is, in a conventional feedback amplifier where there is a feedback loop that controls the gain of the amplifier. A single stage of that kind of amplifier is inverting, meaning that if you have one stage of that amplifier, it's going to invert the polarity, and then you need to use another stage of amplifier to normalize the polarity, right? If you are reversing the polarity in a system, you are either adding or subtracting one stage of amplification. In an electronic sense, you're removing a piece of circuitry or you're adding more circuitry to the signal. And I think it's more likely that you can hear the effect of adding additional electronic circuitry and removing electronic circuitry. I think it's more likely that you can hear that effect than that you can hear an absolute difference in polarity. I'm not going to argue that point because I've never done any A/B blind testing, but I think that a certain amount of the discussion about the absolute polarity of music has to do with the sound quality of the extra amplifier stages that are necessary to normalize the polarity. And so I have never concerned myself with it. That's regarding the absolute polarity of the recording. Within the drum kit, for example, I think it's important to interrogate the polarity of each of the elements of the drum kit to see if you prefer one or the other standing polarity. Like, for example, the rack tom and the floor tom, sometimes it sounds better if they are of opposite phase with each other in the recording. Sometimes it sounds better if they are coherent with each other. The microphones on the back of the drum kit here, the overhead microphones, are looking in that direction at all of these cymbals and all of these drums. The microphone in front of the drum kit is looking in the opposite direction at all of these cymbals and all of these drums. And sometimes it sounds distinctly better if I reverse the polarity of these microphones relative to the microphone in front of the drum kit. Sometimes, listening to just the close mics on the drums and the stereo microphone, it sounds distinctly better to reverse the polarity of the stereo microphone. There's no hard and fast rule, but I have found that polarity matters within the relationship of the different microphones to each other, but I have not found that there is an absolute polarity where one way is good, one way is bad. There is a complication of that, though. Some microphones are electronically out of phase with the sort of standard microphones. This one is a Russian microphone, and for some reason, possibly because it requires extra electronics to normalize the polarity, possibly because there was a different standard in Eastern Europe, I don't know. This microphone is opposite polarity from the other microphone. So if I took this microphone and another Western microphone and put them side by side and summed the signals together, there would be a subtractive effect because this microphone is electronically opposite polarity from all of these other microphones. Every possibility that some microphones, especially that have been bought secondhand, have been repaired or modified at some time, and the polarity of them is not normal. I think it is definitely worth it to understand, to know that about your microphone collection, and know if you have one microphone that's out of phase with the rest of your collection, you can either correct that microphone by wiring the connector differently, or if that's not possible because of some circuit description, then you should at least notify people who are going to use that microphone. You can put a sticker on the microphone or something. But it's a good idea to know that that's an issue, because otherwise you can leave yourself thinking that there's a problem with your console or that there's some electronic problem somewhere, when in reality, some microphones are simply wired backwards from the rest.